TSC meeting for March 23rd. We've got a pretty light agenda for today. We've got Rod, myself, this is James, Jen Turner, Brian Hughes, Josh Gavant, Michael Rogers, William Kapke, Ben Node.js, pretty light agenda, all joining so far for today. Not sure how close we are to forums. I'm not sure if we'll be able to make too many decisions. Brian Hughes, Josh Gavant, Michael Rogers, William Kapke, Ben Node.js. Pretty light agenda. Do we want to do a stand-up at all, or just go right into the agenda? How close we are to forums. I'm not sure if we'll be able to make too many decisions.
Let's go to the agenda.
Review of last meeting. We talked about the upcoming collaboration. Do we want to do a stand-up at all, or just go right into? We'll talk a little bit more about that. We added
go to the
Josh
agenda.
to the TSC. So review of last meeting. We talked about the number here. We talked about the copyright data issue and the updating the copyright. We talked about the revised membership
let's
added
go to the
a
agenda.
little bit more today, and we talked about PR number here, closing one code of copyright data issue, and I think that's back on the agenda today as well. We talked about the revised membership, getting right into it, and we talked about the first item on our agenda is the next collaboration back on the agenda today as well. We talked about the revised mainly, I think, just to kind of make sure that we have an idea of what's happening. There's some discussion about agenda items on the agenda today as well. Getting a formal agenda going for that. And then I think we also need to consider some discussion about agenda items. Have we received any requests for travel funds that we need to approve?
I don't think we have yet. Or, oh no, that's right. Rich did.
Okay.
I have a question. What's up with the code and learns? I was kind of trying to figure out, because I know we had said that we're going to do a couple more this year. I think Rich and Anna were going to do some, but I didn't see any information on that. And the reason why I'm asking in the context of Collaborator Summit is because I mentioned in a thread one other time that in some ways, they're a question of degree, at least what we've done so far. Code and Learn is also, encourage collaboration. And Collaborator Summit is a more advanced form of collaboration, I guess.
Yeah.
So I can speak a little to that. So Rich and Anna put together a business proposal for leading a bunch of the Code and Learn, and that got approved, and there's like board allocated budget for it now. They're not planning on doing one in Berlin. They're targeting some other events where, I mean, a lot of it had to do, I think, with their scheduling, but also with where they could target a lot of prospective new contributors. And I think the thought with the Collaboration Summit is that there's actually going to be a lot of existing contributors around for JSConf, or existing community members that are already doing a lot of code in the ecosystem that we can pull in. And so that was the thought of doing a Collaboration Summit before JSConf.
There's I know that they have one coming up here just at the end of this month in Oakland that they're doing. I think what they're looking at is just kind of more individual targeted events, geographically targeted events, rather than tying them to the collaboration summits.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you know? I guess I could ask Rich, because on the repo, it only has the ones from last year. And I was actually just trying to find information.
We should get that
ones that are coming up.
Yeah, that's okay. All I know. With this particular one, no, I don't think that there was any plan, and I believe that the intent was to try to separate the two. I know that in Amsterdam, it got rather chaotic because the two events kind of ran into one another, and it just wasn't clear what was Collaboration Summit and what was Code and Learn. And then in Austin, it was successful because we had a clear separation between the two. But yeah, I think we definitely need to get a little more clarity, and I think it needs to be made clear that we're not doing it in Berlin. So.
Yeah, well, so one of the reasons why we separated them as well was that even in Austin, which was pretty successful, there was a lot of people very confused about how it was messaged, because one event is literally for people that have never written a line of core code to work on core, and the other event is for people that work on core to talk to each other. So you can see why it's so confusing having them like right next to each other. And so that was one of the main reasons why it was kind of broken apart, and so that we can message them really independently.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and I remember there was a fair amount of just like one-on-one having to like clarify and things like that. I think there was also a bit of contention for resources, like collaborators who were going to go work on Code and Learn couldn't participate in the summit. And, at least I can, in my case, there was some of the Code and Learn folks that I would have loved to have had participate in some of the other discussions we had too. So there's a bit of a contention for resources aspect as well.
So, okay. Is there anything specific we need to discuss about the collaborator summit right now? Since we're still waiting on people to submit travel requests. If not, then I think we should just move on and continue the conversation in the.
I think the question always comes up is, do you have to be a collaborator? And I'm not sure if we've taken an official approach on that or stance on that.
To get the travel funds?
No, sorry. I mean, just to attend in general.
I think, yeah, I don't think we've ever taken an official stance, but I think, like what I've always said when we're actually at the events, I've always invited people who weren't collaborators to come and participate in conversation. I don't think we want to put that kind of limit on it.
Yeah, what I've kind of done online, I've had a few people ask on Twitter, was that they like, you're welcome to come. We love new people coming in, but at the same time, we're going to be getting really in the weeds, and so you might be kind of lost. And so that's kind of like leaving the decision up to them. Do they want to take that on and try and ramp up really quickly? Because the reverse side, something that I think it's important to be careful of is that we don't spend too much time just like restating the problem, and that we have time to really dig into it. So I mean, it's definitely a balancing act that we need to work out.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's.
Let me just say one thing about only having committers invited or not. So I think one of the reasons why this got a little muddy last time was because we've run out of room a few times. Like we have a lot of committers that show up at these things, and we only have so much room that we can do. I don't think that we're going to have that problem so much in Berlin. I don't think that we're worried about overflowing. And so if people that are interested in talking about core that are from the ecosystem, and there are a fair amount of them, I think that we should invite them as well. We just have to say up front that like we're really talking about core and the core project during this. So if you're not interested in that, you probably don't want to come.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, so I don't want to take up too much time. Let's definitely there's a conversation right now about the agenda for Collaborator Summit. Please jump into the GitHub thread and weigh in on that if you have any particular preferences as far as the agenda setting is concerned. And then let's go ahead and move on. Next item on the agenda is copyright dates, issue 195. Rod, has there been any movement whatsoever on the copyright data issue?
No.
That's what I expected. Okay, what about issue 174, the updating the copyright? Any movement there from the legal committee?
No, I've sent that request off. We'll talk about it at the next board meeting, which is coming up, and get that passed on to the legal committee, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah, we had an informal discussion in the last meeting, and which I thought would be really easy, and it turned out to be incredibly complicated. So it's like, yeah, we were hoping that it would be really simple, but it turns out people have really conflicting views on it.
So not surprising, is it? These trivial things that we think are trivial, lawyers make them complicated.
Okay, so does anyone feel that there's anything to discuss at this point on these issues, or just push those off and wait? let's push them off and wait then. So I want to get to issue 142, which is the revised membership rules, but I'm going to push that one second here. Let's talk about the community committee, one code of conduct for everything. And number 7, I think we discussed this before, was setting up, moving the code of conduct to another repo, its own repo. I had the to-do. I was going to go ahead and set up that repo and open a PR. I've been tied up in job change stuff, so I have not been able to do that. It was just a low priority. Before I started down that road, I wanted to just double check to make sure that there were no objections to doing this. Again, the idea is to take the existing code of conduct out of the core repo, move it into its own repo that TSC would still have ownership and control over under the current process, but it would make it easier to reuse in other places and to modify independently of core.
Would that mean one less file in the top level directory?
The current file that's there would probably just contain for the time being, a link to the new location.
Yeah, right.
Could we move that link into the README instead so that we can just get rid of the file?
Yes.
So I have
there are locations that link to that.
I have my unofficial objection. So the problem is we have external links pointing there. So I'd rather not remove it completely because that'll just 404 on GitHub, which is really not something we want for a code of conduct at all. So at minimum, there should be a link there, just pointing you to the right place. But I also just don't feel a special repo is needed just for the code of conduct. I think it would serve just fine under the TSC or even the CTC repo, but it doesn't really belong inside the Node repo, in my opinion, either. So
noted. So
I mean, anytime we start a repo, then it becomes this, okay, who has commit bits here and who can approve this change and who's in charge of it? And I know it falls to TSC, but it becomes unclear. And frankly, the CTC has a giant weigh in on that too. So yeah, I just don't want a new repo.
So should we just move it under the TSC repo then? Does anybody object to that?
That does seem to make sense.
That puts it in line with a lot of our other
seems
documents
like to me.
too. So
Right.
I remember when we first set all of this up, we had this whole idea that like you would copy all of the initial documents for governance and kind of everything over, including a code of conduct. And then from there, you would continue to modify them. And a while back, we changed that process to be, no, don't copy them over. Just like you point at these ones that we maintain. And then if you actually do want to maintain essentially a fork of it or an improved version of the process, then by all means, copy it into your own directory. And for some reason, we just never moved that around for the code of conduct. I don't know why.
So I'll open a PR that moves it into the TSC repo and another PR that modifies the one in core to contain a link. What I would propose for the concern that Will mentioned is that we keep that stub with the link for a number of months, maybe up to a year, and then remove it like maybe around the 10 time frame. That gives us time to update all of those existing links to that file that we know of.
Yeah, I like that idea. Does anyone know if there's a way to get like metrics and like traffic metrics through GitHub, so we could actually see who is requesting this file?
Yep.
It is possible. Okay, cool.
Cool. Yeah,
So,
I wasn't sure. So that'd be a great way to.
Hold on, let me clarify. We can tell how many people visit the file. We can't tell you like what their origin was or something like that, or like what the referrer was.
So if there's still like a lot of hits, or if we just get like 0 traffic to that file after we move it, then we know we can go ahead and pull it.
Kind of on that note of tracking, I agree with that, James. Yeah. On that note of tracking, though, what do we think about putting a redirect on the Node.js org, and just have like / code of conduct or something like that just redirects you to GitHub, and we could then collect traffic off of that. It can be forever the canonical link to external sites. in case it ever
Yeah,
moves
that
again.
works great for me. We can just tell people to go there, and then we can point it wherever we want.
But why is that information interesting?
I'm sorry, Bit?
Why is that interesting information?
The code of conduct?
No, I think
Yeah, why is it
the
interesting
traffic.
that? Yeah,
Well, we want to just check the traffic so that we know if it's safe to delete. Pretty much like I said, we want to avoid 404s. So that's the only reason for tracking it. It's just basically to figure out if it's safe to delete that file.
Also, I would say that, like, if we do something like, say, conducts.nodejs.org or nodejs.org/conduct, we then own that URL forever. And if we want to point it to a different code of conduct or we want to change things, we don't run into this problem again where we have to keep around a top-level file that just has like a stub in it, right?
Yeah, sure.
It would actually be a good idea to maybe like come up with a couple other cases where we can do this as well. Like, we could probably, I would love to see us do this for the board meeting minutes, so that we can keep them in a separate repository in the board repo and not try to integrate that into the website build process and stuff like that. This would be like a nice way to get out of some of the duplicated information that we have to have around in different repos.
Okay, so I will get this PRs opened here in the next day or so. I don't think it's doesn't sound like it's controversial, but if there's any specific issues, just raise them in the GitHub thread.
The other part of that initial issue I opened was kind of mentioning that there are several copies of the same thing across the org, and that's difficult to go change everywhere. And I think Tracy, I wish she was on, had kind of a little bit of apprehension about removing the actual text from the individual places because it would kind of make it more hidden. So I just throw that out there. I don't know how much everyone else agrees with that, but either way, I would still like to have one source of truth, which is what this issue was really about in the beginning.
Right. Well, the places where it's copied out there, I mean, those folks, generally have the autonomy, right? If they want to keep that version there, then great. If not, then we're giving them a central location where this is where the source of truth is. Update it, point to it if you want. Right. So I think what we decided last time we discussed is that as far as process is concerned, nothing actually changes. It's just we're just changing where it lives.
Yeah, I think that's a good first step. I mean, there are a bunch of concerns that we long term, such as viewability, things like that, and I have a few ideas on that. But I don't think that should hold up this move right here.
Okay. Are we any other comments on that, or are we ready to move on? Okay. Cool. Moving on to a little more involved, the revised membership rules. We'd like to get this resolved. I know that the PR has a number of outstanding issues, as Ben points out. There's some feedback based on the changes I made I think it was last week or before last. I revised it to be participation rules rather than attendance rules. And not everyone has weighed in on that since I made that change. Ben offered some very, very good feedback, and I will make some changes to the PR based on the feedback that was received. But I think what we need to do is just kind of come to a resolution as much as we can today that this is what we want to proceed with, and then try to get this landed. We still have the 2/3 requirement for actually passing this, though, and I'm not quite sure how close we are to that.
Can we
It
discuss
seems like
what
there was
the
also
outstanding issues are?
So the other outstanding issue was that there seems to be consensus now that the other 2/3 rule for removing people should be rolled back to a simple majority as well. So that's, I think, the last thing that people objected to that wasn't resolved. As far as the falling back to participation rule, I think that there are some people that probably want to have, that be a meeting rule. Falling back, participation is a lower bar, and so if we can just agree on that, like nobody's going to object to that being the bar. People may want to make it higher sometime in the future, but just in the interest of moving on, I think saying participation is fine. We can probably just move forward with that, because it would be nice to get this approved by the board on Monday.
Okay.
Yep, and this is a living document. We can try it out for a while, see how it works, and then make changes as need be. It's certainly not, a permanent change. It's malleable.
That is not that true. So unlike almost every other document, which is living and we can change at will, every change to this document has to go up for board approval. So it's actually incredibly annoying to change, and whenever possible, this document defers things to other documents. Like the reason why this doesn't cover any of the project process or the project process is because we want that to be a living document. So like, yes, we can come back and revise it like later, but we're looking at like 6 months to a year maybe before we come back and go through this whole thing again, because it is a pain in the ass to get it updated.
So, okay, so the participation rule that I changed it to, there is in the case where an individual TSC member attends fewer than 25% of the regularly scheduled meetings held within a 6-month period and does not attend at least one meeting every 3 months. Ben's specific change was just to collapse that into does not attend attends fewer than 25% of the meetings every 3 months. In addition to the other participation rules. So let me go back and pull up the whole thing so I can read all of it here.
It seems like the simpler, the better. And
Right.
we get, that even if somebody actually misses, like we're not actually going to kick them out. We're just going to go up to them and say,
Ask them what they want to do.
yeah, exactly. That's what's going to end up happening. Unless they literally disappear, in which case they obviously don't want to be involved anyway.
Right.
So,
We have a
make
couple.
it simple.
We have a couple of TSC members. Well, TSC members within Square Codes because they never show up.
Right.
And once we put this into effect, then within a couple of months they'll be ousted.
So the proposed participation rules are this: regular attendance in TSC meetings, actively participating in TSC related discussions on GitHub, and voting. The attendance is in the case where an individual TSC member attends fewer than 25% of the regularly scheduled meetings in a 3-month period. That's what I wrote, altered with Ben's suggestion. Does not regularly participate in TSC discussions, which we need to kind of find what that means, and does not regularly participate in TSC votes. For those second two items, what do we want to define as regularly in terms of the GitHub discussions and votes?
I would say inactivity for 3 months is probably a good bar. Like from what we've seen so far, that really describes, like we don't really have people that, float in the 25 to 30% of participation range. We literally have people that don't do anything for 3 months or are around monthly, right?
So if we say that does not participate in TSC discussions on GitHub and does not vote within a 3-month period.
I'll agree with that, but make sure that abstaining from a vote counts as a vote.
Right.
So you don't want to force people to take a position when they don't, like when they're not convinced, but you do want them to participate in the vote, which would be saying that they abstain rather than.
Right.
Voting is probably a bad word to use here because we go for the consensus.
Right.
Try to avoid voting. So.
Well, I mean, I think we covered that by looking at the participation in the TSC discussions. So it's participation in TSC discussions in the past 3 months and/or voting.
Yeah, and also I would also say that there's not really a cost to having members around that aren't participating in things that have an easy consensus. Like, that's fine. It doesn't hold anything up. It's only a problem when things don't reach a consensus. We need people to weigh in, and we can't make quorum because people aren't participating.
Right. Okay. So does anyone object to that? I'll craft the specific language, but the basic idea is they need to attend at least 25% of the regularly scheduled meetings within a 6-month period, or they need to participate actively in GitHub conversations for sometime within the past 3 months, or participate in votes sometime within the past 3 months. So it's any, not all.
Did you mention 6 months?
The original, the language I have here in my PR said 6 months, but your suggestion was to just make it down to 25% in 3 months, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And if they for that threshold is if they're not meeting that minimum requirement, they are asked to resign. And then if it goes for 6 months, then they're just dropped automatically.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, especially since we're including like GitHub participation, which has a much lower bar to entry. I think like if you're not participating in GitHub discussions like at all over the course of a 3-month period, that's I would say really inactive. I mean, meetings is one thing. Like I could get that being an issue, but GitHub discussions are asynchronous. It's we have to worry about time zones and things like that. So yeah, I think 3 months is a good barrier for that.
By the way, maybe the 3-month thing, we could rephrase it instead of asked to resign. Is there a way to phrase it more like asked to participate? Or resign?
Yeah, or
sounds a
maybe
little
ask
nicer.
what their intentions are, whether they intend to participate. Okay.
I'd still strongly stand that it should just say that they are voluntarily resigned at that point. It follows our bylaws rules. Not abnormal to go that direction. The requesting to resign is strange. If they say no, then we've kind of defeated our purpose of.
Yeah, I agree. It needs. Otherwise there's no point in having it. It's just a guide. There needs to be a gating.
So
they can be removed. The TSC may choose to remove them at this point. Whatever.
See, I would rather avoid taking like a direct action to having it. Like if someone just can't be around for some reason, then it's voluntary resignation. It's not a confrontational thing.
Yeah, I prefer having the 2-step where the first one is basically just kind of a, hey, heads up, let us know what you're going to do or resign. And then at 6 months, it becomes just automatic. Okay, you're just done because you haven't participated at all.
Yeah, I think if we went with the voluntary resignation route, it would be likely that someone would say, "Hey, we haven't seen you in a while. You're coming up on this long," and if they just continue to not show up, then they voluntarily resign, rather than having to take it to a vote.
Yeah.
What's the timeline on the board? Like if you're inactive, do you remember?
It says that there are rules, but I have never seen them, so I don't know.
Isn't it? You've got to be there for like. It actually says you have to be there for every meeting.
Well, yes.
I think on the board you have to be, unless you mitigate.
There is the attendance portion where it's something like if you miss 6 meetings, I think it was, or 6 months, something to that effect.
Yeah. Okay, so I will take a pass no, later on today and tomorrow morning on revising this language again based on this discussion and get the PR set for tomorrow. Michael, the next board meeting is Monday.
Yep.
Okay, we need to try to get a 2/3 vote on this by Monday. So I'll get it definitely updated by tomorrow. If everyone can please commit to looking at it and putting in a vote with the intention of being able to send this to the board by Monday afternoon. What time is the meeting Monday?
Somewhere around
2 p.m. 2 p.m. Pacific.
Okay.
But I need to get a board deck out tomorrow, so I'll probably take whatever changes you have, stick them in the deck, and then if you don't make the vote by Monday, then I'll just drop it from the agenda in the meeting.
Would it be less controversial and maybe expedite this if the participation rules were broken off into its own living document? I mean, I think things that go in the charter should be things that the board really is concerned with, and I'm not personally thinking that they're too concerned with how the TSC brings people on or ushers them out.
That I would not say that that's true. So, I mean, this may have changed in the preceding 2 years, but when we initially wrote these documents 2 years ago, several board members were very concerned with how we defined how people get on and off. The concern was that, people, would get thrown out or excluded, or, there could be some kind of hostile takeover, like that kind of thing. So there's always been a lot of interest from board members in how we define the membership rules of the TSC, and I mean, they do want to have a hand in approving that along with the rest of the charter.
Okay, I think who's eligible should still go in there, but the participation part,
I think that.
But wait, what we have now, I mean, we're going to need 2/3 of the TSC to vote on the new document. I don't expect that to happen before Monday. I mean, if you see how long it took to get the votes that we have today, I think that's completely, yeah.
I'm not optimistic either, Ben.
Well, how about this? I'm not very optimistic either. What if on Monday at the board meeting, Rod, I guess if you could bring up this idea around participation of like this idea of putting it into a living document and just like gauge if the board is okay with that or not, get like sort of a provisional okay on taking that route. Because like I think if the board is okay with that, I would definitely prefer to do that as well. That'll make it easier for us to tweak as we go along and as we figure out how this is going to work in practice.
Yeah, I think that's a viable approach. I think it'd be good just to kind of gauge where the board is on it.
Okay, I mean, we can try. I don't expect to have an overwhelming response. If that's just for the purposes of getting this expedited, maybe we just shouldn't rush it for this one and put it off till the next board meeting, or even ask for a board to approve it asynchronously on their because board can approve stuff via email.
Yeah.
So if the rush is a concern, then let's not rush.
Okay, I'm good with that too.
It does seem like we've missed the boat here. Or I mean, James, you could try like send out an email to the TSC mailing list and see if we can get the votes.
All right, so I will try. Not optimistic, and if we don't make it by Monday, we can do the async by email approach. And I think that as part of the request to the board, I think asking them if this is something that they really care about and want to see in the charter, or can it live on its own? I think that's also a viable question to ask. So.
Okay, I'll put that to them.
I want to get to the other issue here that was raised about the the voting off the island requiring a 2/3 vote. So the document is currently written such that like the current charter requires 2/3 to add and 2/3 to remove. Now in practice, we've done unanimous to add. The idea for the 2/3 to remove was to set a pretty high bar for us to take that action. It has to be a pretty significant thing for us to force somebody out. We're changing this document changes the adding rule to simple majority, just in case we can't get a 2/3 quorum. We can still add somebody. but it keeps the 2/3 rule for removing. The suggestion, the feedback is that we should either just keep it at 2/3 for removal, or keep adding and removing the same at either 2/3, or keep them both at simple majority. I think, Ben, you were commenting on this, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you want to talk about it a little bit, or?
Well, yeah, you summarized it pretty well. I think it should be either 66%, so 2/3 for both, or the fewer exceptions the better. Just make everything. So that includes removal and adding a new member. Make everything 51%, so simple majority. And I personally have a preference for the latter.
Does anyone object to making removal simple majority?
In favor of what?
For to remove. So on the off chance we have to vote to have somebody actually removed from the TSC. Should that be 2/3, or should it be simple majority vote?
I think if we're just voting, that should probably be higher rather than lower.
Okay. But why?
I mean, kind of prevents like essentially people from being maliciously removed at some point.
Okay, but
So-
vice. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, like, you could say that about any decision that we ever make. I mean, like,
Yeah, I suppose so. But like,
and also, I mean, like, the biggest concern here is that the reason that you usually remove people is because you're having a hard time meeting quorum. So how are you going to meet an upper quorum bar when you need to remove people?
yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, well, fortunately, it's not a situation that we've had to deal with, and it's not a situation that I anticipate us having to deal with, especially once we get into the new the new participation rules. Anyway, it allows it to be more of a just kind of a natural. Somebody's not participating, so they just fall off on their own. Does anyone strongly object to it being 51%? No. Hearing nothing.
In the spirit of JavaScript, it should be 50.9999999.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I do think that it should say majority vote, like all the other language that we have around this, and not be a percentage.
Right. Yeah. That's a floating point, a simple floating point. Something. We can come up with some good language here. Okay. I have a general preference for it to be a higher bar, but I understand the argument. So I'm not going to object to it being simple majority, particularly since we really have had no reason to exercise this, and I don't anticipate any particular reason to exercise it. So, I think we've done a fairly good job so far of just kind of allowing consensus-driven and probably a really good consensus-driven model. So I don't anticipate it actually being an issue. Okay, so I will update the PR to revise the actual participation rule as we discussed. and I will update removal to 51%, or not 51%, but simple majority.
James, real quick question, hopefully. You mentioned 3 months, then we ask nicely, and after 6 months, someone is removed automatically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm kind of with William that I think that's too long. It means that we could hypothetically be at a standstill at the deadlock for 6 months. Yeah, and that's, well, self-evidently bad, of course.
So, I mean, yeah, you're right. Another way that we could do it is that anytime after 3 months, they become eligible to be voted off the island. So if they don't voluntarily resign at the 3-month mark, then the TSC could vote to remove them.
I mean, we could just vote to remove them anyways, though. Right?
Yeah, you're gonna have a harder time doing that, though. I think honestly, like,
Yeah.
the having the language the way that it is ideal, even though it's a little bit complicated, because one like, if we're not having quorum issues, it would be really attractive to just never remove anybody. But I've seen in other projects where this becomes like a really big problem, where down the line you do need to remove people, and because there's just been this culture of never removing people, it becomes like an emeritus status, and people get really pissed off when you do finally remove them, even if they haven't participated in forever. And so just establishing up front that like membership has a participation bar is good, and setting that to be, 3 months is a nice standard to have if we start to have quorum issues and we need to remove some people to get there. But having 6 months be okay, we're going to do this even if we kind of don't want to, right? Even if it's like an annoying thing and we're not meeting quorum issues, having that in there is also really good because it keeps us in the habit of keeping everything clean and having that participation bar.
Yep, agreed. And I'd also add that having it automatic is important because if we are voting on it, that does make it feel more personal. When it's automatic, it can't come back to us as like we decided that we don't want you. It's like, I'm sorry, but this is just how it works. This is an automated system. It's impersonal.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that. I mean, you're supposed to vote in the best of the project, and if that means that we need to vote of people in order to get quorum, well, that's the way things go. Yeah, someone that's voted off shouldn't take it personally. If they do, that's their problem, not ours.
I don't. I do and I don't agree with that. Just practically speaking, people will have a problem most likely with it. Just human beings are irrational, and I'm not thinking about this in terms of their feelings. I'm thinking about this in terms of the potential to create a shitstorm on Twitter and stuff like that, and then that's something else that we have to manage. And I'm just basically just worried about like flame wars breaking out because of it, and trying to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's big part of that is why we document this process. So if somebody's just not participating after and 3 months are going by and issues are getting backed up because of it, and we explicitly ask them, hey, are you going to participate or not? Anytime after that point, I think we are perfectly justified in voting somebody off the island. And then at 6 months, it just becomes automatic. And we don't even have to have a vote. There's nothing that says that we can't do that. Like, it might be 3 months and a day, and that person just has not responded to issues critical enough where we have to have something, right? We still have that option, and we have something that we can point to and say, hey, this is our defined process. There's nothing personal about it. And the person might get upset and and they might say something, but we have something concrete to point to, right? I'm not as worried about that.
Okay, but if I follow your logic correctly, we'd still have the problem that we could be at a standstill for 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's something I'd rather avoid because we're already at a point where we're almost perpetually deadlocked because we don't have enough people to make quorum.
Right. So let me ask this: if the TSC is voting to have somebody removed, does the person that's being removed count towards the quorum?
Yes, and that's the problem.
Should it?
Well, they have to. If they're in, they're in. They get a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this comes up a lot. But like, if you don't, you run into this issue where people can create motions that remove multiple people, and then it changes the quorum rules dynamically. Like that's why you always include them in it. That's also why I don't want to have that higher bar for the quorum.
So Ben, what is your suggestion here then to avoid that deadlock?
Well, yeah, simple. 3 months, 3 months below the activity bar, and you're out.
I mean, I'm kind of for that, to be honest. Like, as long as we have an easier road to getting people added back on when they want to participate again, I don't see the problem in removing them. Like, we do need to turn this into a participation list rather than an emeritus list, right? And that's a good way to establish it.
No, I agree.
Okay. I have no objection to that. Let's keep the language though that says that the person they may be removed after 3 months by for their voting rights, but they're still welcome as an observer. And I think that gives us that easy path for them coming back on later, if they know that they're still allowed to at least participate in the conversations.
No, I feel that we're being a bit too gentle here. If people aren't showing up, then they don't care. So just cut it off.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. Now, one thing we could do is we could keep these like sort of 2 different deadlines, but just shorten them. Maybe do like these sort of gentle suggested. Maybe you should resign at like say 2 months, and then at 3 months, that's the hard stop.
I think 2 months is a bit short though. I mean, we're looking at that's only like 4 meetings.
Look,
That's true.
if we're
Maybe
gonna
like
do
3
this,
and 4 or something.
if we're going to do this, we might as well just take the opportunity to simplify it, like Ben said, and just keep it to 3.
Just say 3 months. Yeah. I mean, any one of us can send somebody a warning if they're coming up on the 3 months, right? I don't necessarily think we have to formalize that.
Also, I mean, we only meet every 2 weeks, and it requires a vote for this. So there's going to be like they're going to get mentioned in an issue weeks before they actually get removed. So
Yeah.
It's not like they're not going to have forewarning.
Yep. Okay. Okay. I'll modify the PR to just do that. Just to have the one threshold at 3 months, or just automatically dropped.
We're getting late, so I just want to call this out real quick. I dropped it in the Q&A thing. I've noticed some stuff from the Medium at Node.js. Michael, I guess you might know about this. There's been some funny snippets coming into my RSS feed. And even now there's like I would consider a bit of a funny message at the top, but maybe that's how Medium works, so I don't know. But just FYI, I've been getting all these little snippets.
What are snippets?
I could share my it says like, oh, this doesn't look like a good edit, or this might turn somebody off if we say it this way, or could you change this? And they're coming in my RSS feed from that.
Are you like in the publication?
Mm-hmm.
So
Maybe
you're in the publication.
I'm just gonna suggest maybe we should open an issue and find, since we're almost out of time in this meeting.
And send a screenshot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody
You
might
can
be
see
making
it, but,
comments on a published article instead of and thinking that it's still in draft.
Take a look there, right at the top article. Maybe that's a Medium. It just says, thanks a lot for taking the time to review this pretty long. I think you got most of the edits.
Which one is it? Which article is it?
It's just right there up at the top. First one under latest.
I feel like it may be because you're also added in publication. I'm not positive.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's because it wants you to see them because people are supposed to collaboratively edit stuff before it goes into the publication.
I'm
Okay.
actually seeing it, and I'm not logged into Medium.
Fuck.
At all.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, let's open an issue and take care of it there.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm seeing it now too. So,
But
okay.
yeah, this is important. I'm not trying to dismiss it. Just saying
Yeah.
time.
Okay. All right. So I think that closes our main agenda. Do we have any questions from listeners?
No, no questions.
Okay. Then I think that closes out our public agenda. Thanks anyone who's listening, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So